So the concept of the bank collapse now, compared to what happened in 2008.
So different.
That's what everybody's talking about. Anytime at this point, anytime a recession or anything bad happens, we compare it to what we all went through in 2008.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, they did say the real estate-backed mortgage securities, like that came up, and that some of that's what they had their money in, right?
Yeah. So two things. So first off, when SVB was going through this liquidation of assets, right? Essentially, what they're doing is just selling the investments that they have, and most banks are really heavily invested in bonds because why?
Safe.
They're safe, right? They're safe when you make it to maturity, but when you have to sell them out of nowhere. And the bonds that you bought in 2020, 2021 are now essentially worthless because of what? The Federal Reserve, right? Big Daddy Powell raising the interest rates on everybody like crazy has now devalued these bonds so much that they're essentially worthless. So they go to sell all of these things and essentially, oops, we don't have the assets to cover the deposits that we thought, or our shareholders thought they had, right, with us. Now, '08. That was really different. I think you guys.
It's crazy that was 15 years ago already, but
that is wild.
Everyone always compares everything to 2008. It's always way different than what we experienced, and it was probably unique. But explain why. What's different? What happened with the bank when we had to bail out all the banks in 2008? How's that different than?
I mean, it was a foreclosure crisis, right? Like it was a predatory lending crisis. And unfortunately, it started to all come to a head in '07 and '08, where all of these ridiculous subprime mortgages that all of these banks were heavily leveraged in, right, started to default, and all of them started to default right around the same time. And you can only take so much of that before you go belly up. So there is a little similarity.
Because then their bond, it's essentially like what the banks invested the money in, then went away.
Poof. Exactly
it's not that people were claiming the money. It's just that asset just disappeared.
Well, it's kind of similar to SVB, right? They went to sell these bonds that were supposed to be safe, but they sold them at an inopportune time. It was kind of similar, right, in that regard, but very different causes for those things. We're definitely not in a foreclosure crisis.
Right. So therefore, we're not going to experience the same fallout.
It's definitely different.
Yeah,
most certainly. And the Fed seems to be stepping in to do as much as they can possibly do to stabilize it.
Yeah.
Even though there, I think, could be some pretty good arguments for like maybe why they shouldn't have. Right?
So let's talk about the Fed for a second, because today is also a significant day because the Fed is meeting. I think we're all waiting for the news, actually.
Oh, it's already done. Yeah.
Oh, it's already done.
Yeah.
What is it? What happened?
25 basis point hike again.
Okay.
It went up.
Yep, it went up. And there was some pretty big differences, right? Like Goldman was saying that they didn't think they were going to raise it all. Reuters said 25. Some people were calling for reductions. Mr. Elon Musk was calling for a 50 basis point reduction. And the Fed stuck to their guns and said, nope, another 25 basis point hike.
Yeah.
I think that we will see, I think the next meeting is May, if I'm right.
Okay.
I think we may see a hold in May.
Okay.
At this point. That would be big policy change, and it's essentially the Fed saying like, uh-oh, we know we broke something, we should stop.
Right.
Right? Which is a little bit what they did.
I think they would have just put a pause on it this time. But whatever.
So ultimately, so the Fed raises rates again. What impact does that have on inflation?
Well, hopefully it has some impact, right? Because inflation still is pretty rampant at this point, and it's come down some.
Correct.
And I think that, again, looking forward...
That's what the data shows.
Yeah, it does. But I think, again, looking forward to May, we will start seeing some bigger reductions in inflation. And the whole big reason around this is, not to get too deep into the weeds here, but the Fed looks at two numbers very, very directly. It's the CPI and the core pricing index, right? Well, shelter is a big portion of that number, okay? Shelter encompasses all things housing, all cost housing. The problem is that their numbers that they're looking at are very flawed because the shelter number is a year old. They look a year behind, right? Mm-hmm. So then we have to look a year behind and say, where were shelter costs a year ago? Because right now, shelter inflation is like at about 3%, right, month over month. Well, this month's CPI showed it at like 7+. That's not real, right? So eventually,
showing the inflation's higher
than
is
it
what that
really
means, right?
is.
Yeah, right. Like it should be lower.
So in May,
on the CPI number.
When the CPI is released, that should, if you're looking at all the trends, be when shelter finally starts to come down. and we actually see some pretty big reductions. And if that does happen, again, one idiot prophesizing, I think rates could come down because of it. So something to look forward to.
But inflation happened because we pumped a lot of money into we gave more supply, right?
Of
more
course.
money, right?
Well, there's so
But
many
then
different
we just
reasons.
what did we do with the bank bailout here?
Yeah, well,
Like,
we're
is it
increasing money supply.
Is it a small amount? Is it like comparative to what we did for COVID, right? And all of those COVID relief, that money is what really has caused the inflation, right? But now that
turns out a lot of people that got PPP money did not need all of it.
What?
but so now is there going to be?
I got a nice car.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Out of it.
Is there more? Are we
Thanks,
putting more
PPP.
supply into the market now? So are we in effect, like, are we going to see
Some inflation
going up again because we have more money in the market?
Yeah, so I think your logic is totally right.
Or is it just not going into the right hands? It's the money that was just sitting in the bank.
It's still
going to
be in circulation though, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that you may see some increase in inflation because of it, because they are just pumping money into the system by doing this bailout. You're 100% right in that. But that's not the only portion of inflation, right? We all know that a large portion of inflation too is supply issues.
Yeah.
Right? It's not even that demand is so ridiculously high. It's that supply just has not caught up. And COVID was a big reason for that.
Of course.
Restrictions on usage of things like the gigantic crates that they use to ship things overseas and not allowing people to use as many
Logistical issues.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You start looking into the nuts and the bolts of how things were regulated during that time.
Right.
Those things, unfortunately, aren't being removed at a rapid enough pace to bring the supply up to where, okay, we're starting to see a little equilibrium.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's, unfortunately, it's just a lot of facets to the problem.
Yeah.
And the Fed only has the blunt tool that they have, which is beat the hell out of the middle class and make everything more expensive for lending. Right.
So to bring it full circle, to bring it back to real estate, back to lending, we talked in our last episode how the Fed raising rates, it's not that people think that means raising your mortgage interest rates, not the same thing, not even necessarily correlated. What is the state of interest rates today, especially in light of the Fed raising rates? Quarter of a point.
As of an hour or so ago, when the Fed did it, bond markets reacted favorably.
Okay.
But as I have experienced during this journey of the Fed doing what it does, there's a lot of knee-jerk reactions in the market, right? And you have to wait a little bit.
Right.
Give it 48 hours from when this kind of a decision happens to see what's actually the trend that's going to happen. So we'll see what happens. Rates are still sitting right around like 6.5 to 6.375 on single-family homes. So they're still better than they were, right? They really did top out in September of last year at about 7.25.
Okay.
So we're still in that downward
God, were
trend.
they over 7?
For single-family homes, yeah.
Wow, that was pretty brief though.
It was very brief.
Yeah,
It was 100%
I do remember
peak.
seeing that 7 number and being like, damn.
I know.
Just a year ago,
Yep.
a year and a half, we were in the 4s, 3s.
I know.
It's crazy. But you actually think down the road the rates are going to go, you think they might go down.
Yeah. So, and I think a lot of it.
Which a lot of people are saying a lot of people are saying, lock in now because rates are going to go up and up and up.
Yeah. Again, right? One person. But
yeah, sure.
Looking forward to what's going to happen at least in the second and third quarter in terms of inflation data that we're kind of suspecting is going to happen, especially now with the banking crisis and if the Fed puts the brakes on raising their rates.
Mm-hmm.
I think mortgage rates are going to come down because of it. I might be wrong, but I really do think that's what's going to happen. How much is the big question.
Sure.
Is it going to be enough to get refinances on people that did close in the upper 6s or 7s?
Right.
I don't know, right? We'll have to see, and I think everybody needs to keep their eyes peeled.
Well, that's interesting because I just watched a presentation yesterday that was going through all the most recent data, and that's actually in line with what this speaker's opinion was and his foresight. What he was saying was, because of everything going on, you're not going to have a crazy spring market like we're accustomed to, but you're going to see a year that continues to get stronger and stronger as you go on in the middle of the year, later in the year, and what have you. And he also echoed that sentiment that they would come down, not into the 4s,
Right.
but we could see them start getting back into the
high 5s,
mid 5s, maybe even low 5s as the year goes on. So
Yeah, no, there's a whole other side to this. Like, interest rates are not the only driving factor in, in what's going on in real estate right now.
That perfect segue into our next topic, exactly as we're going through here.